So basically, as Claire said, I thought the key thing I wanted to just talk you through today is we all face challenges as team managers and as people who work on teams at the moment, which is we are increasingly constrained in our resources, both as people, both as kind of the code bases we have and the tools we have available. So what is invisible labour? That's probably the best place to start. So there are two types of labour that you and your teams do on a daily basis. Your visible labour is the stuff you get up in the morning, you get to work, you have your sprint meeting about, you sit down and you say, this is what we're going to do today. This is the stuff I need to do. The invisible labour is actually the series of micro tasks that effectively prevent you from doing most of that during the day. They turn up and they stop you doing it. Now, these things are true whether you write content, whether you are a developer, whether you are a content administrator, whatever your role, these things exist. And getting to the heart of where those things are and dealing with them and making them visible labour is a key challenge if you're a team leader. Because actually, whatever time you're budgeting for things to happen is almost certainly wrong. And actually, when you get that wrong, it increases your own stress, it ruins your deliverables, and actually increases the stress on the team. Because how many people here, put your hand up, if in the last month there has been a day where you've got home and gone, I have no idea what I did today. So that's pretty much everyone. And congratulations, that day is an invisible labour day. So let's look at an example of this from Greenwich. So what you're looking at on screen right now is our 5-step, relatively straightforward process for adding a banner image to the top of one of our web pages. So step 1, you upload it. You use our web hub, you upload your image onto the website. So this is users in this context that I'm talking about here are the people who use your CMS. They're your institutional users, not your clients, not the people who are coming to us as prospects, as researchers, as everything else. So they upload a file. They turn around and note down the ID. They then browse to the page they want to include it on. They put underscore on the edit on the end because we use Squiz, and then they can edit that page. They add that ID to the thumbnail field, and then they publish it. That's the process. It's not the simplest, but it's not technically advanced. It's a relatively straightforward process. That's the documented process. So let's look at that process with some invisible labour thrown in. Now remember, not every user is going to do this, but it's about knowing what percentages of your users do this and how you address it. So, adding a banner image, query the image. Is this image appropriate to use on the website? Well, actually, I know there's some documentation on that, but I really like my image and I really want my image to go up. I'm just going to pick up the phone and I'm going to ring someone in the web team. And I'm going to say, can you have a look at this image and is it right? Is it relevant? So that's instantly a piece of labour that someone's had to do. Then they upload it. Oh, the upload failed. I'll ring the web team, I'll find out why it didn't fail. There'll be messages on the screen, but were those messages good enough to tell them effectively? Did they see them? Did they not see them? Did they just not understand them? The upload failed. Ring web team, raise a support query. What you get is, that is a 50 megabyte TIFF file, and unfortunately, upload that. Which leads to the next invisible task, which is, well, how do I resize that in Microsoft Word? You don't. Look, tell you what, email that file to me, because I've got Fireworks or Photoshop or whatever, and I'll resize it for you and I'll send it back. It's another invisible task. They've noted down the ID now, so they've sent it back, and maybe you even uploaded it for them. We're still going. So, browse. They've browsed, I can't seem to edit the page. Now, actually, one of the things we found is quite common with this, and it's about, again, and I'll touch a bit on this a bit. Don't think of this as a bad thing. This isn't a bad thing. This is just what users are doing. It's about pragmatically accepting that they behave in these ways. Can't seem to edit it. Well, did you put underscore edit on the end? Yeah, I put edit on the end. Did you put underscore edit on the end? Yeah, I put edit on the end. Okay, let's do a Skype screen share and let's have a look and see what you're actually doing here. So, again, it's like, is that language we're using, is the techniques we're using actually helping people? They've now added it. They've now published it. The image isn't showing. Well, did you publish both the image and the changes you made to the page, or did you just publish one or the other? Oh, I don't know. I'll go check. Now, even if they go check that themselves and fix that themselves, it was still an interaction that you had to have with them as a team. So invisible labour is all of these tasks that just creep up and they add up, and you don't even note them. Even if you're doing timekeeping, you probably aren't noting them in any kind of timekeeping system to say you're doing them. Just to note that these don't have to be ones that just kind of you're external to the team users or things are doing as well. So let's just have a quick look at a clip of this happening, which requires me to remember which side of the screen I'm on. Here we go. So this is a bit of invisible labour going on. I love the internet. The internet is the best thing. We work in the best world. Let's watch that again. So Yoda in this instance, I mean, obviously in this quick clip, my team will tell you I am Yoda. I am the person who is misnaming the file. But this is how your dev teams can also create invisible labour. And we'll touch a bit more on this in future. It's Obi-Wan's face. Oh, God, Yoda. Every time, Yoda. This quote by Jason Freed of 37 Signals is one of my favourite quotes ever. When's the last time you had 3 or 4 hours to yourself to get work done? It probably wasn't at the office. Again, quick show of hands. How many people have occasionally gone with the, right, I'm going to work from home to get some actual work done? That is because there is an awful lot of invisible labour in your day. As managers, one of our forms of invisible labour, for example, is update meetings. I'm hoping that one of our project managers, Jonathan, isn't watching this, because literally as I walked down the stairs to come down here, he said, do you have time at 11 o'clock for a quick update meeting? To which my reply was, no, I'm presenting at a conference on invisible labour, which includes update meetings. Now, update meetings are good. They are good things to have. You need to have them with your project teams, but you don't need to have them if no one has nothing to say. Just because it's in the calendar doesn't mean it has to happen. If you can have a quick email exchange, it says, at your own time and in your own kind of area, to say, does anyone actually have anything to add this time? No. Okay, well, let's skip this meeting. We definitely need to do one next week now, because we didn't have one, but let's skip that one meeting. So again, let's look in a bit more detail at the impact that microtasks can have. Now, we all work in higher education institutions. And the one good thing working in a higher education institution is we are surrounded by lots of very clever people who do lots of research. That includes research into things like microtasks and work-time balances and how developers do things and what they actually do with their eyes and their voices when they're coding and how much time does it take them to do things. So this is just some data from a 2013 survey that was done in conjunction with Microsoft, where they were looking at Microsoft developers within Microsoft and the impact that microtasks have on their time, on their daily time. Now, the biggest impact it has, as we were just talking about, is task switches. You will be working on one thing, your team members will be working on one thing, and they have to switch. That email notification box pops up in the corner, that phone goes, someone leans over the desk and says, have you got a minute? That's a task interruption, and it may trigger a task switch. When that triggers a task switch, the average number of task switches the average developer within Microsoft at this point was getting during the day, and remember, Microsoft at this point were very good at trying to they thought they were being very good at rationalizing their developers' time and keeping them free from interruption. It was 50 task switches a day that people were doing. The time to complete on a task that someone switched from and then went back to, so 100% in this metric is the amount of time that task would have taken if they hadn't been interrupted. The amount of time it took them to complete that task, excluding the time that they went off and then did the other thing for, so the cumulative time of completion, for an interrupted task by a task switch was 266%. So it took more than double the time to do a task that you had been interrupted to do. They also found that 31% of the developers' times within this content was spent on comms. That was phone, email, quick chat, whatever else. So even when they thought they were rationalizing this time down, it wasn't being rationalized properly. The other thing they found was, and this is an interesting one, is that 40% of those switches were self-made. Now what I mean by that is the person who was being interrupted decided to go off and do something else. Now that means that they weren't asked to go off and do something else, they decided to do it. And they decided to do it probably because they were being helpful or anything else. So really, just in terms of understanding microtasks, the key things to remember are they're not inherently bad. They exist because people are trying to do their jobs, and they exist because these people want help to do their jobs. Or they exist because maybe we wanted to code something quickly and we didn't have the time to do it in a structured way. They're not inherently bad, but they do need to be acknowledged, and you do need to recognize them. And once you recognize them, you can engineer them out. Now, you can't engineer them all out, but you can start to engineer a lot of them out. So what I thought we'd do next is just take a quick look at this. There's three kind of broad categories you can fit these things in. So I thought we'd just take a quick look at those different categories and how you might identify them and some quick ideas for how you can do them. And these are things that, some of which we've tried to use at Greenwich, some of which we've been able to use at Greenwich, but these are all things that you can kind of work on and try and do. So the first category is what I describe as, they're all things that are due to what I call the mass effect, which is your websites are spaceships. You know, the bigger they are, the harder they are to turn, the more staff they require to run. Now, this is a theme that is universal. No one in this room doesn't know this. But what you probably don't realise is how much that isn't just contributing to how rubbish your code base is, it's contributing to how much extra effort your teams and your first-hand users are having to do to manage and run things. So let's look at some of the things that can trigger. You know, if you hear anyone say one of these things, a microtask has either just been triggered or is about to be triggered. That section is set up differently to the other ones. It's very similar to, oh, that page is in the old style, we have to change it for you. These are things where we have left legacy code bases in, or where we've built something custom for people and it then instantly backfires and you then need to intervene in some way. Because it's not normal, it's not what they're used to. This page looks weird since you made those other changes. That is the worst thing you can ever hear, because it essentially means that you've changed something in the code base somewhere, and then it's that random email that pops in from a department you'd completely forgotten existed that says, you've just broken our page somehow. Awful. And then finally, this is what I call the one in the bottom, kind of, is it left on your screen? Yes, it is what I call, it's part of the 3 monkeys of coding, which is, can anyone remember who coded this? Can anyone remember where we coded this? And can anyone remember why we coded this? All 3 of those are things that contribute to microtasks. So if you remember that Yoda bit from earlier, Yoda is very much falling into the can anyone remember where? You know, the file naming was bad. If that followed a logical structure, actually, maybe Obi-Wan would have been able to find that file without having to go and interrupt Jedi meditation. So some of the ways you can deal with that are, really, these are just general overall tips and guidelines. And again, they're not things that are unusual. They're not things that other people in this room haven't said and we don't say in the pub afterwards. But again, recognize that they do have a BAU, a business as usual contribution, as much as they have a development contribution. Build consistently. Don't create custom interfaces or sections. Just don't. It's very rare that actually what that person wants is what they really need. And that's back to blocking complexity. Make people do the basics first. Yes, you want to have a really shiny, amazing subsection for your research group, and that's brilliant. But why don't you start with trying to write 3 articles about it? And until you've been able to put together 3 articles that tell me why it's important, what it's good at, and what you're up to at the moment, we're not doing your big complex research site because you haven't got any content for it. You know, get your content right first. Now, actually, what tends to happen with that is it's a positive experience. It's a positive experience with the user because they then instantly start to discover how hard some of this stuff is. And they realize that they don't have the time to maintain that complex setup. And then they go, well, actually, can we do something simpler? Because I'm not going to have time to run this. So these can be positive experiences. They don't have to be negative. Maintain standards. This is something that, again, I know Paul's gone on about before, everyone goes on about it, but we live in a HE world where, close your ears, vendors, but vendors want to lock us in. They want us to use their special features because if we use their special features, we're locked in. The best vendors will help you turn around and say, actually, this is an industry standard approach to a thing. If you structure your code this way, if you write semantically, if you use JavaScript for this thing rather than our custom plugin for the CMS, then if you need to move to a different CMS or do a different thing, you can. But the actual benefit it brings in terms of invisible labor is it means skills become transferable. It's much easier to turn around to another team member and say, you know what, go on lynda.com and do a basic trial and bit in JavaScript, and you can at least browse the code base. You can see where things are happening, even if you can't fix that code yourself. And actually, that gives them a pathway to development. It means that your junior people who might actually never have thought about becoming some kind of coder or a developer, they might discover they really enjoy that. And what you've done is started them on a career journey as much as anything else. So our second category is very much the fear of the unknown. Some users won't jump. You need to give them a gentle push. This is your people who will always pick up the phone. Again, I won't run through them all in detail, but I'm sure all these 4 things are things people have heard. I mean, this sector is the absolute king of that top left corner. I don't think I've been trained on this. I think you'll find you have, and you attended that training course 5 times, and we've got the record for it. They're all things that really, though, come again from a position where people want help. They're not confident in how they're doing things. Or they've been placed in a position where they can't do a thing. They just don't have the technical skills. And really, in terms of handling these things, that comes back to the same things. Make tutorials. Don't write documentation, make tutorials. Right, documentation is the worst thing ever. There is no one, no developer, no manager who can genuinely say they like writing documentation, which is fine. That doesn't mean that people don't need help. What it does mean is you should treat your documentation in the same way as you treat your websites. You don't turn around and build a giant website with everything on it. You say, what do people actually need? What is the things we're getting those invisible labour questions about? Because those are the things we should be writing documentation for or doing videos. How does that person want to know this information? When they call you up and say, I can't work out how to get to the edit link, use that as almost a user experience exercise of turning around and saying, well, actually, how would you have wanted to learn about that? Oh, I just want to see a short video. Now, actually, that might not stop the phone call, but it at least means that when that phone call comes through, the person who receives that phone call can turn around and go look at this link, go look at this video. That will tell you how to do it. That will provide you the reassurance without needing a human intervention. And that jumping ahead slightly actually comes back to our say no at the end. You know, users will keep coming for that validation as long as there isn't a cost for them not to do it. You have to motivate users for change by applying a cost to the action. And that cost might well be, well, no, I'm not going to sit on the phone with you doing this yet. You need to go off, you need to watch that video, you need to give it a go yourself, and then you need to come back. And actually what you're doing is helping people fly. And again, it's really important to do that. Again on this, demand skills. It's no one, well, I suspect it's very few people in this room's job to teach people what a computer is and how it works. Yeah, again, hands up everyone in here who has ever had to turn around and explain what a browser is to a user. That is the point, you put the phone down. Nicely, put the phone down, put an arm around them, escort them out the door, and then shut it. Because we exist in institutions that take great pride in training people. Your HR department, most institutions, organises lots of training about how to use Microsoft Word and everything else. It's about computer literacy. Don't let people who are computer literate do things on your website. If they're not computer literate, don't let them do things on your website. That's not just to make your life easier, it is to make sure that your university doesn't instantly compromise every single security rule it's got, every single content rule it's got, everything to do with GDPR, everything else. You know, use those things as armor and say, look, I need you to go off and do that first. And you support them, you can get them to help their manager to get them through training, but don't tackle it. Someone else needs to do it. And finally, on this one, rotate phones. Jamie, who's my lead developer, who's in the audience here, will tell you over in the pub that one of the first things I did when I arrived at Greenwich was I changed his phone number. Because Jamie is the most helpful person in the world ever. And that means that users kept ringing him. Because users naturally go to the people they know will help. And actually, sometimes you will have new teams set up to deal with that. You will have different people. You want to spread those tasks. You want people to be able to concentrate. We don't and shouldn't be hiding behind anonymous forms and help forms, but we do need to make sure that what doesn't happen is people disproportionately end up providing the majority of support. It's particularly if they're not good or need coaching in how to not be interrupted. So our final category is what I call the Leroy Jenkins of this world. That laugh tells me that there are at least 3 people in this room who used to play World of Warcraft. So this is a concept. That button you told people not to click, he's clicking it. There's always that one person, whatever button is in your CMS interface that you go, right, well, we're not implementing that yet. We'll implement it in a while. We'll just tell people not to click that button. Everyone in this room has that one person. It's somewhere out there in their institution who has clicked that button. So to provide a little bit of context on this, Leroy Jenkins is a legendary meme within gaming where essentially World of Warcraft is a big multiplayer game. It involved lots of people getting together into groups, and then they go and do things called raids, and they have to cooperate to do these things. These things can take 2 hours to do, and at the end, the longer and the more hard it is, the better the rewards you get. So you need real cooperation and planning on some of these things, because you might do 2 hours of work and then get nothing if you get it wrong. So that's the context. Let's just show you, if we can find it. So this is actually from about 2000 and 8, I think. This is a raid that's going on. They're planning, they're working out what they're going to do. They've got a big room, they're going to take everything on. Watch the guy highlighted in green on your screen.
Yeah, give me a sec. I'm coming up with 32.33 repeating, of course, percentage of survival.
It's a lot better than we usually do.
All right, thumbs up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Oh my God, he just ran in.
There is someone in every single institution who will do the web equivalent of that. Right, we brought in this new interface feature. We're going to make it useful in that. Nobody click it. What do you mean you've already clicked it? So how do you turn around? And that's what happened, by the way, after that. I would have played it. But it's before 9 o'clock, and there was an awful lot of swearing. So these are things that can allow you to trigger when someone is either has Leroyed or is about to Leroy. I thought I'd try it myself, always a good one. Bottom right corner is the absolute classic, we've hired a graduate intern. I have absolutely nothing against graduate interns, they are wonderful people. We produce some very good ones at Greenwich. We have very good web design graduates. If you want to hire some good web design graduates, hire them from Greenwich. But they come into the world, into this world as lovely newborn baby developers. They have no real world experience. And that's natural, that's what they're out to get. But actually, part of real-world experience is knowing when to do this stuff, when to say, actually, I'm not going to build that feature in. Now, actually, if a department independent of you is hiring a graduate intern to work on that thing, chances are they are not providing that level of guidance and support that you actually need them to have. If they're going to embed them in your team, that's fine. And that's one way you can address that in terms of limiting invisible labor in situations like this. You can embed them in the team. But if you can't do that, the chances are that what's going to happen is, what's going to be created is a project or an outcome that no one will ever be able to manage once they leave. And that really contributes to the bottom left here, which frankly is one of the biggest contributors to invisible labor in this entire sector, which is the person who set this up isn't here anymore. So these things are many of the things I'm talking about on here, but this sector has no concept of planning for when people leave. Let's just be bluntly honest about that. It does not. When has anyone in this sector been able to do any effective succession planning? It just doesn't happen. And there are reasons for that. We are careful about how we recruit. We have recruitment cycles. We are large organizations. But don't pretend it's going to happen. What's the point? So actually what you really need to do in terms of managing your Leroys is very similar to managing your users who are struggling, which is you just need to make them do the basics before they try and do everything else. Define permissions. Make sure your permission structure correctly blocks things you don't want people to do. Enforce simplicity. Again, as I say, we'll do that bit in future, but let's just try some basic stuff first. Be experts. Claire touched on this earlier already. Everyone in this room is an expert. I know that as a sector, there is an enormous amount of kind of feelings of imposter syndrome that kicks in sometimes. Don't let it. You are experts, and you are experts at what we do. Expertise in a different subject or an interest in digital media outside of this room, outside of at work, does not instantly make you an expert. We are paid to do this. Be proud of that and push that forward. And then finally, hide everything. CMSs have lots of features you never use. This is why CMSs are global products. They need those features because other people are using them. If you can't define your permissions to get rid of them from the interface, then use CSS, use JavaScript, use whatever you want. As long as you do it in a reasonable way, you can get rid of it. Hide everything. That is the best line of code you can ever write into a CMS. It's that easy. Find the right class, find the hook you've got on the thing, and just stick that on it in the CSS file. Now, okay, it's security through obscurity, but you know what? If a Leroy manages to find that button after editing the CSS file and then do something, well, congrats, you're now working for the web team. That's the kind of proactive problem solving that actually you kind of want to encourage, but you also want to control. So just finally, some quick wins here. Look, it's okay to say not now. The biggest improvement you can make to a team is building in a culture that it's okay to say not now. That doesn't mean not never, but it does mean not now. Can I have your help with something? Sure, but I just need 45 minutes to finish this off. Let me come to you in 45 minutes. I'll come back to you. Then do go back to that person. Build that culture of going back. But not now is fine. Closing email down is fine. Whether you're a developer, a content writer, whatever else, there are very few things that we do in this sector, very few times of the year where the difference between you reading an email now and reading it in an hour's time is genuinely going to matter. Close the email down. Don't get that notification box. On that, again, back to that task switching thing, this is important because actually you don't get the time to do stuff. And you can track developer and how developers concentrate in really weird ways. Everyone who develops, by the way, you all sub-vocalize. They've done some wonderful studies of every developer sub-vocalizes. So you're actually talking yourself through your code even though you don't realize it, and it's actually reverberating in your throat. And various exercises now have mapped that and looked at where do people vocalize most. And interestingly, it's not actually planning code, it's writing the initial logic. It's not bug hunting, it's not anything else, it's writing that initial logic. It's okay to remove access. If a user isn't good enough, don't give them access. Take it away. They are a danger to your system and your website. Be nice about it, but make it their manager's problem to solve, not yours. And it's okay to say, prove it. They want to make it complex, as I say, fine, write 3 articles first. That's it. That's all you need to do. So that's our tips. That's what I do. That's me. Any questions? Just ask.
Brilliant, that was most excellent. I could feel a lot of people nodding all the way through that. So yeah, have we got any questions?
Hi, Jane Vanderban, Birkbeck, University of London. Thank you so much. That was so spot on and really chimed with our own experience. I just wondered, because the word invisible is the key one, how is it that you make it more explicit to other users what the impact of their request might be? Or do you do anything like that, or do you just recognize that it exists and try to engineer it out?
I think it's a tricky one because there's 2 sides to it. Is you don't, as I say, most of these things are not users trying to be horrible people. They're just things that they're trying to do to get their job done. So actually one of the things is back to that putting cost on things. So you almost have to kind of make it a subconscious awareness rather than a conscious awareness with the user. And the easiest way to do that is to insert a time delay. So, okay, we can help you with that, but we're not going to be able to help you for the next half a day. So what you might want to do in that half a day is give it a go yourself. You know, because it's a thing that is, in their mind, it's their urgent thing to them, but it's, you insert that delay and you add that cost elsewhere. Occasionally you do need to get explicit, but normally I find it's rare that you have to do that. But sometimes we've got some clients, internal users, who they just keep asking stuff, and eventually you just have to turn around to them and say, no, we're not here to just do your thing. If you can't do this, you need to speak to your manager and get some help. I think there's only been one instance where I've actually had to resort to copying in a manager on correspondence and just starting to kind of flag it that way. Generally speaking, people will adapt. The trick is trying to make sure that they don't realize they're adapting. So subconscious techniques is quite useful. Basically think of yourself as a kind of evil online troll and work out how you troll them into doing something different and do that. It works.
Stephen Evans from University of St Andrews. Thank you very much, Gareth. A lot of what you said resonated with what we've had to deal with at St Andrews. And 2 years ago I gave a workshop on what we call digital firefighting. One of the key things for us was to actually start analysing the source of requests that came in, and we categorised them into whether it was someone asking for advice, whether it was something to do with fixing something broken, or was it a request to do something new. And as a team, we tracked how long it took us to resolve those, whether it was coming in by email or person to person or a phone call. And we did that for about a year, and we realized that about 22 hours on average per week was dealing with stuff that just randomly came in. And so from that, we were able to plan and say, we actually need one person full-time to deal with support calls. And then beyond that, we were starting to then analyze what was the root cause of these calls, and then come up with actions. So, for example, we trained the service desk to deal with first-line support calls to do simple things like fix broken links, so we no longer had to do that. And then, so I won't go into any further details, but our long-term objective at St Andrews is to simplify, standardize, and consolidate to manage down the complexity we have and field off, which is what you're talking about in your talk. So thank you very much. You did it very eloquently, and hopefully other people got something out of it.
I mean, just to add, that's something we have done as well, and I think that is the end result. I mean, I've got 2 content developers, and they are very good, and they're very good at working with my developers and designers now in terms of making sure that we do things like that. We track requests through Sunrise as a support system, and actually they have done some really good numbers for us that really identified, for example, actually our messaging on our login page was wrong. And actually an awful lot of the queries they were getting through were related to people getting confused about the difference between, say, logging in with an admin password and logging in with their regular university password, because for various reasons at Greenwich they're different. So actually changing the error messaging on that page had an enormous knock-on effect on the invisible labour tasks that content team were having. We weren't having them as developers, my developers weren't having them, but it was hitting a layer for that content team, and actually freeing up their time to not deal with those then has a positive knock-on in development and beyond. So don't just think of this as being a technical issue. This is about, we are all developers, regardless of whether you work on content, whether you just work within a CMS, or whether you write code. Everyone these days is a developer. If the level of computer literacy required to do your job is higher than just the basic standard human being, I use Facebook level of competence, you are a developer.
Brilliant. Can we show our appreciation in the usual way?